happened to the trachea. But don't read into this brisa that's what? Don't read into this brisa that's what? That it's only the veshet that can be shechted and not the trachea. In other words, you could shecht either one of the two simanim of a bird, and either one is absolutely fine. Just the mitzias is such that in cases where a siman became dislodged, more often than not, just I guess for anatomical reasons, it was the trachea which became dislodged and not the esophagus. Tashma. Shachad shnei chatzai simanim ba'of psula. Let's listen to this. If you shecht 2 half simanim in the oaf, it's pasa. So we'll say what this sounds like is what? I shecht half of the kana, half of the veshet, so it's pasal. So we'll say which makes sense. Why? Why is it pasal? Why is it pasal? Because halacha l'maisa, by a bird you only have to do one, but what do you need? The rov of that one. So if you shecht half of 2, that's pasal. I will say it goes without saying that, of course, if you shecht 2 half simanim by behema, then of course it will be pasal as well. Rabbi Yehuda says, "Ba'ov ashi yishchot es haveshet ve'es havridin." So Rabbi Yehuda says, by an oath, you have to shecht the veshet, the esophagus, and the vridin. Also, we're going to discuss the vridin. I sent you out that beautiful picture today, right? Look at it before you have brownies, right? So again, we'll talk about the vridin on Amud Beis. We're going to talk about the vridin, the jugular veins. So again, but again, what do you see from here? The reason why it's bringing this up is why? Because it sounds like by an oath, what do you have to shecht? You have to dafka shecht the veshet and not the kana, which would seem to support the position of Adavar Ava, to which Gemara says, no. Mishum the veshet samach l'ridin. No, it's not true. We'll say just by an oath, according to Rabbi Yehuda, because Rabbi Yehuda holds that by a bird, we want you to shech the vridin, which we will discuss a little bit later on. The veshet is the siman that is closest to the vridin. That's why Rabbi it says the veshet and the vridin, but in no way does it mean to say what? In no way does it mean to say that a dafka has to be the veshet and not the kana. Tashma, weiter. Shachat chatzi gargeres. V'shal kidei shchita acheres. Let's listen to this. I shecht half of the gargeres, right? I shecht half of the esophagus. And then what happens? V'shal kidei shchita. And then I both say, I wait, I pause. Now remember again, shehiyah is one of the invalidations by shchita. So I shecht half of the gargeres, and then I pause for enough time to do an entire shchita. What's that? I'll have a gamra shchita. So, and then I finish the shchita. Kshera, we'll say ultimately again the shchita is kasher. So my love both. So we're not talking about a case of a bird. Umay gamra. What does it mean that I finished it? Gamra the gargeres. I finish off shechting the gargeres. To which the Gemara says, "Lo bebehema umay gamra." No, what is this? We're talking about a case of a behema. Umay gamra. We'll say, what does gamra mean? Gamra the shchita kula. Ultimately, it means I finish the shchita in its entirety. So therefore, again, I will say this case does not help our machlokes at all. Tashma hare shahaya chatzi kana pagum. Another interesting case. We'll say, let's say again, the kana trachea was half perforated, right? Trachea was already half perforated. What's the halacha? For hosif I love kosher. And I will say, I cut a little bit more of the trachea. So that now what? I will say, what's happened? The majority of the trachea is now cut. Now, granted, half of it was already cut before. I just added a little bit of a cut. What's the halacha? Shchita. So kshera. The shchita is kasher. So we'll say, my love ba'of. Right? Are we not talking about a bird? My gamru. And I will say, what did I finish? Gamru lakana. I finish off the trachea. I will say, what do you see from here? You see from here that by a bird, even cutting one sim in the trachea is good enough. The which Gemara says, lo, not necessarily. It could be talking about a behema. My gamru. I will say, what does gamru mean? Gamru levashet. Could mean ultimately, again, I'm finishing up the trachea as well as the esophagus afterward. Tashma, Keitzad Molkin Chatas. We'll say, remember again, another brisa. How do you do malika on a chatas hof? Chotech shedju mafrakes below Rav Basas. We'll say the kohen takes his fingernail from the back of the neck of the bird. He cuts through the shedra, the spinal cord, the mafrakes, the neck bone below Rav Basar, and he does so without cutting the majority of the flesh around the neck. Ad shemagia leveshet o lekana, until he gets to the veshet or the kana, the esophagus of the trachea. Higia leveshet o lekana. Once he gets to the veshet or the kana, chotech simin echad. He cuts one simin for rov basar imo, and the majority of the flesh along with it. Ubaola, there's a chatos. Baola by olas haof. What's the halacha? Shnayim o rov shnayim. he cuts Rabbi say he cuts both simanim or one of the simanim. Rabbi say, what do you see from here? You see from here again from the case of Chata Sof that what Rabbi say, one siman is enough. And which siman? Which siman? Either one you want. To which the Gemara says, Tiyufta the Rav Ada bar Ava Tiyufta. We have effectively refuted the position of Rav Ada bar Ava. So Rav Ada bar Ava said that by a bird, although yes, you only have to shecht one siman, Rav Ada bar Ava was insistent that it has to be the veshet, it has to be the esophagus. Interestingly enough, you are disproving Rav Ada bar Ava's position, interestingly enough, not from regular shchita, but from sacrificial shchita. By chata sa'ofra bose, which only requires one siman, the Bryce explicitly says that what? That what? It's whichever siman you want. So you see from here that the halacha follows Rav Nachman, that a bird only requires one siman for shchita, and which siman? Which siman? Whichever one you want. Good. So tiyufta. So the Rebbe said, the Gemara says, first wide line, chaf on the bottom, chaf chesam adalef, my havi Allah. So says the Gemara, so no, what's the bottom line? What's the halacha l'maisa? The Gemara says, my havi Allah, I just told you. Kidika Amrit, what are you talking about? Right? We just said, we've effectively refuted the position of Rav Ada bar Ava, which also de facto means we paskin like Rav Nachman, a bird only requires one siman, which everyone agrees with, by the way. Everyone agrees with what? But now we're saying either siman you want, either the kan or the veshet. To which the Gemara says, no, I'll tell you why we're asking. Dilma, shiny hasam dika, shedjom afekis. So remember again, maybe the bird case, right, by Malika is different. Why, Rabbi Osai? Because remember again, by the time you get to the simanim of the bird, what have you effectively done? You've broken the spinal cord and the neck bone. Maybe all you need is any little siman, either the kana or the veshet, to go ahead and totally kill the bird. But I will say, that's different than a regular case of shchita sa'of, where what? You're not coming from the back, you're coming from the front. But I will say, remember again, let's be clear. If you were to try Malika, right, you go home, you want to have chicken for dinner, you say to your wife, hey, look what I learned in Shira, watch this, right? And you go from the back of the neck, and say, what's the halacha? The animal is a treifa, right? You cannot eat that animal, right? That animal is a treifa. So the Gemara is suggesting is, you wanted to prove the halacha l'maisa from the case of a sacrificial animal. Sacrificial animal might be different, because remember again, by the time you get to the simanim, I will say, of a sacrificial bird, that bird is almost lifeless. So in that case over here, maybe you could say that's where the kana or the veshet works. Maybe if you're coming from the front of the animal, maybe the halacha is different. So therefore again, Tashma, here we go. The Hubar Avzod, the Hava Beirava, was actually a very interesting case. There was a goose in the house of Rava. Asa, so what happens? Asa kirmasmes koedama. So we'll say what happens. They wanted to slaughter the bird. Now, when they were about to kill the bird, they saw that the neck of the bird was already bloody. So something already happened to the goose, right? So what happened? Amar Rava. So Rava said, "Listen, we want duck. Goose, is goose and duck the same thing? No, Avza means a goose. Okay, good. We want to eat the goose, right? You want to eat the goose. The shayla is, Rava said, we don't know what's happening now. There's obviously been some type of injury with do people eat goose? Yeah, goose. Okay. Okay, good, fine. All right, good. I'm not asking you if it's good. I'm just asking if you believe it, right? Good. So I don't travel in goose circles. So, so the Gemara says, so what happened? So they want to shecht it. So something happened, meaning there was some type of traumatic injury to the goose. So how do we figure out if we can eat it or not? So watch this. What should we do? I'm going to say I'm a base. So nishchite v'hadir nivdike. So maybe you'll say, look, here's the easiest thing. Let's shecht it. Then we'll open it up and we'll check it. You can't do that. Why? Dilma b'makom nakav kashachit. But say, here's the problem. Maybe one of the siman was already perforated. And the problem is you will not be able to tell if it was perforated. Why? Because you're cutting through it. So maybe it'll turn out that the area where you cut was an area of pre-existing perforation, which are both say again, depending on the kana or the vesha. We'll discuss, we're going to get, it's actually very exciting. When you get into Eila Trefas, you're going to discuss all of these halachas, but it could very well be that halacha l'maisa, by the time you cut it open, the cut may actually obscure the pre-existing perforation. In which case, what might look like a kosher animal now was in fact a treifa. Right? So nishkatei v'hadir nivkei dil makam nakav kashachit. Nivdike v'hadr nishchate. So if you'll say, well, let's try to examine it now prior to shchita. That's not going to work, and I'll tell you why. Ha'amarava veshet ein lo badika mibachutz ela mibifnim. Well, see, that's actually very interesting. We're going to discuss that generally when you shecht an animal, you have to inspect the esophagus. But the esophagus can only be inspected internally. Again, ein lo badika mibachutz ela mibifnim. Can only go ahead and be examined from the inside, not from the outside. Rashi says over here, ein lo badika mibachutz lefishu treifa benekemash. Because it says, we just said before, the esophagus, right, even if there's any small perforation, ultimately renders the animal a treifa. Ve'eno nikar v'tipas dam nichneses mon bifnim beneka ve'eno nikar aval krum ha'panimi lavanhu v'tipas dam. So we're going to see that in fact the esophagus is actually, interestingly enough, inspected from the inside. So the problem is, if you want to say let's shecht it, right? So I'm sorry. Nivdika v'hadr nishchate. If you want to say let's inspect the animal and shecht it afterwards, that's not going to work. Why? Because you can only examine the veshet, the esophagus, post shchita. So what should we do? Amali Rav Yosef Berei. Here we go. Nivdike lekana v'nishchate. Let's inspect the trachea. Let's inspect the trachea to the best of our ability, and then shecht that. Then shecht that. And then v'lichshrei. Now, also here's the good news. Once you shecht the trachea of the goose, then what? Then what? We're good to go. Right? Why? Because a goose, which is a bird, only requires one siman. And even if it's and that's true if it's the kana or the veshet. V'hadar, once you now shecht the trachea, let's open up the goose. V'hadar lafchua leveshet v'livdike. Then Rabbi say what happens? Then we'll do the internal examination of the esophagus as well. Amar Rava said, Chachim Yosef brei b'trefes Rabbi Yochanan. My son Yosef is a baki in trefes like Rabbi Yochanan, who was an incredible expert. Rava say, but for our purposes, what do we just see? What do we just see? That by a bird, what was the halacha? You shecht one siman, and which siman? Whichever one you want. So we'll say, you see, that's the point of this story. Again, we're going to get into all the details about the trefes of esophaguses. Many esophaguses is right. Good. So we'll get into those halachas. We'll get into those halachas. We'll say, but for our purposes, again, the fact that the Gemara said that the way to deal with this goose is how shech the kana. The goose is good to go. Now, boss, remember again, once you shech the kana, the goose is fine. Obviously, you still have to check the esophagus afterwards to make sure the animal is not a treifa. That you're going to have to do. But for our purposes, what we come out with is what? Is an alocha lamaisa. You could shecht one siman and whichever siman you want. So both sides, we have two very, very, very critical and important pieces of halacha lamaisa so far. Number one. Yesh shchita min ha'of min ha'torah. Midoraisa, you have to shecht the bird, right? It's not just behemoths and chayes which requires shchita. Ophos requires shchita as well. That is midoraisa. However, midoraisa, Rabosai, the halacha is only one siman is required by an oath. Only one, right? But which siman, Rabosai? So that was a machlokes between Rav Nachman and Rav Ada bar Rava. Rav Nachman telling me either one, kana or veshet. Rav Ada bar Rava saying no, dafka the veshet. It has to be the esophagus. How do we paskin? We paskin like Rav Nachman, o kana, o veshet. You could shecht either one of us. So you could shecht the trachea or the esophagus, and you must shecht either the rove, right? It doesn't have to be the whole siman, but rather just the majority of that siman. We'll say two critical pieces of halacha l'maisa. Now we go back to. We'll say this is incredible. Remember again, Rabbi Yehuda said in the Mishnah that what it's true. He agrees that halacha l'maisa, by birds, you only have to shecht one siman, whichever siman you want, and the majority of that siman. Rabbi Yehuda was mosif. Rabbi Osai was that what? You also have to shecht the vridin. Rabbi Osai, if you look at the picture that I WhatsApped out today, so the vridin are the jugular veins. The jugular veins. So Rabbi Yehuda says that by shchita, by an oath, there has to ultimately again be the shchita of the vridin. So says the Gemara, here we go. Boss, it's actually quite fascinating. Some Rav Chisda, lo am Rabbi Yehuda ela ba'of. Boss, listen to this. Rabbi Yehuda said that the halacha of shechting the vridin is dafka a halacha in birds. In birds, by an animal you are not obligated to, by behemah you're not obligated to shech the jugular veins, but rather again it's only by a bird. Why? Boss, this is incredible. Ela ba'of hoyo Vitzaleo kulo ke'echad. Because I will say by birds, it was common that people would roast a bird intact. In other words, I will say people often would not cut up birds into pieces, but rather would roast it whole, would cook it whole. And I will say, now why does that matter for us? Because what we're going to see is the cutting of the reed in Abosai is a mechanism by which to extract the blood from the animal. You're not allowed to eat blood. So Abosai, by regular behema or chaya, again, normally what? You were cutting it into pieces. The act of cutting it into pieces already extracted the blood from the animal. Because birds were often prepared whole, you wanted to cut the reed in order to extract the blood. This is really quite amazing. Rashi says over here, "Hoil v'tzaleh kulo ke'echad lefichach tzarich lahotzies kol damo." So we'll say, so because you wanted to go ahead and get the blood out, you would cut the jugular veins in order to get the blood out. So therefore again, aval behema keva deminsacha aver lo tzarich. But I will say by a behema, because people would often cut up behemoths into pieces. Therefore, what? I do not need to cut the vridin. To which the Gemara says, so Lememra, the time of Rabbi Yehuda Mishum Damu. So we'll say now what you're telling. So this is actually very interesting, because Rabbi say this makes a major distinction. Because now what you're telling me is, see, from the Mishnah, I would have thought that the cutting of the vridin, according to Rabbi Yehuda, is what? Is part of the shchita. What the Gemara is telling me is that no, the vridin is not part of the shchita. The vridin, I will say, is a utilitarian step necessary for blood extraction. In other words, I need to get blood out of the animal. So for a behema, because it's cut up into pieces anyway, the blood's going to drain like that. By birds, because often people are preparing it whole, I need to cut the vridin as a form of blood extraction. I will say it's very important. So it's not part of shchita. It's not a din in shchita. It's a din in blood extraction. Which I will say, we're going to see many nafkaminas. Watch this. The Gemara says, "Lameimra, the time of Rabbi Yehuda mishum damu." So you tell me now the cutting of the vridin, I will say, it's not a din in shchita, but it's a din in blood extraction. But we learned, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, ad sheyishchot esav vridin. I will say, remember again, what did Rabbi Yehuda say in the Mishnah? Rabbi Yehuda said, "At sheyishchot esav vridin." Right? I will say, so what's the lashon there? Shchita, which sounds like the cutting of the vridin. I will say, is not just a utilitarian step for blood extraction, but rather is part and parcel of shchita itself. Ema ad sheyinkov esav vridin. No. What it means is, I will say, read it instead. What? Until he pierces the vridin. I will say, the vridin are not part of shchita. The vridin just have to be cut however you decide to cut them for blood extraction. But it is not part and parcel of the shchita. Umay ad sheyishchot. So why does he use lashon of ad sheyishchot? Ad sheyinkov b'shas shchita. The vridin, I will say, must be cut b'shas shchita. Now we'll discuss again why it has to be done b'shas shchita. We'll get into that in just a moment. But halacha l'maisa, it's not part of the process of shchita. Instead, again, it's a standalone process for blood extraction. Tashma vridin b'shchita. Rabbi Yehuda was another brayso. Rabbi Yehuda says the vridin have to be shechted. So we'll say it sounds like that. What? The cutting of the vridin is part of shchita. Ema vridin tzarach lenakvan b'shas shchita. Rabbi Yehuda. We'll say no. Read it instead. The vridin have to be pierced. The vridin, I will say, don't have to be shechted like the siman, but rather, again, they just have to be pierced in some way that the blood comes out. So, Tashma, Amru lo Rabbi Yehuda, me'achar shelo huzkaru vridin el lahotzi mehen dam, mali b'shchita, mali shelo b'shchita. So, listen to this. In this brayso, the Rabbanan said to Rabbi Yehuda, if we agree that the vridin, ultimately, again, are not really part of shchita, but just have to be pierced to extract the blood. So then, what does it matter if I do it with shchita or if I just pierce it? Michlal, the Rabbi Yehuda savar b'shchita. Both say now from that exchange, it sounds like what? That according to Rabbi Yehuda, he would hold that what? That the vridin themselves mamish need real shchita. Hachi kamer. This is what it means to say. Mali lenakvan b'shas shchita, mali lenakvan shelo b'shas shchita. Both say, in fact, the Gemara says, no. What the Rabbanan were saying to Rabbi Yehuda was as follows. Rabbi Yehuda, if we all agree that the vridin are not part of the shchita process, and that the vridin just have to be pierced for what purpose? To extract blood. So what does it matter if you pierce the vridin during the shchita, or what? Sometime after the shchita. To which Rabbi Yehuda responds, no, I'll tell you why. V'husavar, b'shas shchita asi dam dechaim. The lo b'shas shchita lo asi dam dekara. Rabbi Yehuda will say, and this is incredible. Rabbi Yehuda says, listen, I agree, we're all on the same page. The vridin are not part of the shchita. They're not part of the shchita. They are not part of the halachic process of shchita. But rather, again, it's a utilitarian step for blood extraction. But yet what? It needs to be done during shchita. Why? Because Rabbi say during shchita, the blood is still warm. See, Rabbi say, the issue is when the blood is warm, the blood flows easier. When the blood cools down, and the animal's body, for that matter, cools down, it coagulates, right? Rabbi say, or again, even if it doesn't actively coagulate, it just doesn't flow as freely, right? So therefore, Rabbi Yehuda will say something very interesting. We're all on the same page. The cutting of the vridin is not part of shchita, which is very important, which is why, as we're going to see in just a little bit, you don't have to even cut the vridin with a knife, right? You could cut it however you want. But Rabbi Yehuda says, please, it needs to be done during shchita, because that's when the blood will flow freely, because the blood is hot, the body of the animal is warm. The moment that the body cools down, the blood cools down, the blood does not flow as freely. Incredible. So what's the Rabbi Yirmiyah? Read in, here we go. Read in Rabbi Yehuda, Shah Bahen, Daras Bahen, Mao. So both say, so going along the same logic, asks Rabbi Yirmiyah, according to Rabbi Yehuda, who holds that you have to cut the vridin, do the psulim of shchita apply to the cutting of the vridin or not? So for example, Shah, if you tarried, or Daras, instead of cutting it, you press the knife into the vridin. What's the halacha? Amar lehu saba hachi amar Rabbi Elazar amar lehu saba Rabbi Elazar hachi amar Rabbi Yochanan menakvan bakots vehin ksherin. We'll say that halacha lamaisa, even if you pierce the vridin with a thorn, right? Ultimately, again, the shchita is still good, because we'll say the truth is we don't care how you cut the vridin. What do we care about? That you cut the vridin. So we'll say, by the way, you'll begin to see also something very interesting, which is, technically speaking, along these circumstances, even according to Rabbi Yehuda, if you were to cut the bird up into pieces and you didn't cut the vrid, then it's quite possible that what? That the bird would still be kosher as well. The idea over here is Rabbi Yehuda is just saying the cutting of the vridin is a utilitarian step for blood removal, blood extraction. So therefore, again, it's not part of shchita. Therefore, the psulim of shchita don't apply. The mechanisms of shchita don't apply. You want to cut the vrit, you want to cut the jugular veins with your fingernail, with a knife, with a thorn, with a stone. I don't care. Just cut it to get the blood out, and just cut it when? At the time of the shchita. So the Gemara goes weiter. Tanya kavase de Rav Chisda. So once we have a brayso which supports Rav Chisda. Shachat shnei chatzai simanim ba'of pasel. Both say if you cut two halves of the siman by a bird, it's possible. So we'll say, why is it possible? Because a bird only needs one, but what? It needs rove, right? So if you cut two halves, that's irrelevant. Both say it's possible by oath, it's only by behema. Rabbi Yehuda omer ba'oth ad sheyishchot es haveshet ve'es harvidin. Rabbi Yehuda says, by an oath, you have to shecht the veshet and the vidin. And we'll say ultimately both the veshet and the vidin, which we'll say just tells us again, for our purposes, what that tells us is that halacha l'maisa, one has to cut the vridin, and ideally, again, it should be done b'shas shchita as well. But again, not because it's a din in shchita, but ultimately, again, because the blood is warm and therefore flows out freely. So we'll say, and this is indeed how the Shulchan Aruch paskins. This is in Yeridea Simin, Chaf Beis Sif Aleph, Ba'of, Sarech Lishchot Havridin. And we'll say the halacha is by oath, you have to shecht the vridin, you have to shecht the jugular veins. O lenakvam b'shashu mefarchis sha'adayin hadam cham kedei sheyitzi v'lo yiskara b'socho. So we'll say, so the halacha is, listen to this. So therefore, we'll say this is Shulchan Aruch Yeridea Simin Chaf Beis. When you shecht the bird, you have to go ahead and shecht the vridin. When? We'll say it's actually interesting. B'shashu mefarchis. Mefarchis means what? While the animal is still convulsing. Because it says, we'll discuss, even after you shecht the animal and the animal's dead, the body still moves, right? It's still convulsing. So as long as the animal is convulsing, the blood is still warm. That's when you have to shecht the vridin. So listen to this. V'im lo asakein. We'll say, what if you didn't shecht the vridin? Is the shchita kosher? Is the shchita kosher? Yes. Right? However, lo yitzlenu shalem. right? Ultimately, again, Abba say the halacha is if you did not go ahead and cut the vridin, don't go ahead and roast the bird whole. Rather, cut it up into pieces. So again, we'll get into this. So for our purpose, again, we're going to get into these halachos in greater depth. But for our purposes today, you have to cut the vridin. B'shah shchita. B'shah shchita is defined as what? Anytime from the time you begin the shchita, as long as the animal is convulsing. What do you need to cut it with? Anything you want. If you did not cut the vridim, again for our purpose, as the Shulchan Aruch just says, don't roast the bird whole, roast the bird in pieces. Ultimately, against that, the blood could drain. Now, both sides, the Shulchan Aruch does go on to say, if you did roast it whole, there are ways to go ahead and deal with that ultimate death. So I'll tell you something very interesting. Now you begin to see something fascinating, which is the only carbon that we have that you roast whole is Carbon Pesach, which I both say again, we begin to see behemoths don't have the din of vridin. As we're going to see, I both say by regular behemoths, the halacha is actually roasting the animal is the fastest form of blood extraction. Right? So it's very, very important. That's why vridin is dafka din by ophos. So this is really like incredible. It's really like it's like a Yom Tov gift today. Right? So we'll say so again. Look at all of these halachas that we're getting. We're getting shchita ba'of midaraisa. We're getting siman echad ba'of either the kana or the veshet. We're getting we pass like Rabbi Yehuda. You have to cut the vridim, not b'shchita. Again, remember the din of the vridim, also the jugular veins by an oath, is not a din in shchita. It's a din in blood extraction. Remember, Rabbi Yehuda is saying, I want to make your life easier. Because if you roast the bird whole without cutting the vridin, it's just more complicated. The animal can still be consumed, but as we're going to see, there are certain parts of the animal you have to remove prior to consumption. So cut the vridin with whatever you want, b'shah shchita. B'shah shchita is defined from the time you cut the first siman, as long as the animal is still convulsing, the blood is warm, ultimately, again, it flows out. Not a din in shchita, but a din in blood extraction. Good. Right, Rabbi say, Chatzi echad ba'of, itmar. Rav Amar, the say, is actually very interesting. Rav Amar, mechza al mechza kirov. So, say, listen to this. We're going to get now into a discussion about shechting exactly half of a siman. Half of a siman. So Rashi says over here, mechza al mechza, kasagadaitcha le'inyan shchita kamar, kilomar, siman shechatzav shamut, v'chatzav ino shamut, havi ki'ilu rubo shachut v'kasha. So we'll say, we're going to come back, because we made reference to this now before. Seit my Rav Amar, mechza al mechza kirov. So we'll say, we think now we're talking about shchita, that if you have a siman, which half of it is cut, that's ki'ilu, the majority is cut, and at least by a bird, let's say. By a bird, if you had that for one siman, the bird would be kosher. By a behema, if you had it by two siman, it would be kosher as well. Rav Kahana Amar mechza ino karov. Rav Kahana says no. We'll say half a siman is not like rov. Rav Amar, so what are they arguing about? Rav Amar mechza karov. So Rav says if half the siman is cut, it's like rov. Hachi Amar li Rachmana LaMoshe. This is what HaKadosh Baruch Hu said to Moshe Rabbeinu. Lo tishayer ruba. So we'll say, so according to Rav, that Hilchos Shchita said as follows. HaKadosh Baruch Hu said to Moshe Rabbeinu, do not leave the majority or more of the siman intact. So as long as at least 50% of the siman ultimately, again, is cut, then what? I will say, see, if 50% is cut, then what? The majority is not intact. So by Shchita, Rav will say, as long as the majority of the siman is not intact, the Shchita is good. Rav Kahana Amar mechza ino karov. Rav Kahana says no, that is incorrect. Mechza is not karov. Why? Hachi Amar li Rachmana LaMoshe. This is what HaKadosh Baruch Hu said to Moshe. Shchot ruba. The majority must be cut. So I'll say, you hear this nuanced machlokes. What is the halacha of shchita? Is the halacha that the majority may not be intact, right? Or is it that the majority must be cut? So Rav says the halacha is that the majority cannot be intact. Therefore, if you cut 50% of the siman, therefore what? The majority is not intact, and therefore the shchita is good. Rav Kahana says no, the din by shchita is that the majority must be cut, and therefore if half of it is intact, ultimately again the majority is not cut. So Tanan, both says let's analyze this. Tanan, chatzi echad ba'of, chatzi echad ba'behema, shchita sapsula. So we'll say, what did we learn before in the Mishnah? Right? What did we learn before in the Mishnah? That if you cut half of a siman by an oaf, or 1.5 simanim by a behema, the halach is that what? The shechita is possible. So we'll say, if indeed you hold like Rav Kahana, the nechza al mechza, that 50% is like a rov, am I possible? Ha'avid le rov. Right? So we'll say, if I shech 50% of a siman by an oaf, or 1.5 simanim by a behema, according to Rav Kahana, that shechita should be good. To which the Gemara says, you're right, midirabanan dilma lo asi leme'avid palga. You're right, we'll say the truth is, midorais, according to Rav Kahana, that case would be good. What's the issue over here? It's possible midirabanan. They will say, why? Because again, the chazal, because even if you hold like Rav Kahana, then midaraisa, the halacha is that the majority cannot be intact. And therefore, again, if 50% is cut, the majority is not intact. Midrabanan, we're concerned that a person may end up cutting a little bit less than what? A little bit less than 50%. Therefore, even if you hold that midaraisa, mechza is kirov, the Rabbanan still say you have to cut more. So Amrav Katina, Tashma, Chalku l'shnayim. Actually, I will say we're going to stop over here for today with Rav Katina. We'll pick up Emir Hashem with the rest of this sugya, Emir Hashem tomorrow.